Hello, welcome to this session on CFA study strategy. My name is Simon Holohan and I'm the head of CFA exam training here at Fitch Learning. I'm expecting quite a few people from all over the place to be dialing in and watching. It would be very good to have a little idea where you're from. So there's a text panel you can type in, so it'd be great if you just type in and tell me where you're watching this from, just so I have a rough idea of who's watching. In the meantime, just introduce myself to you and the point of this session. So, as you can see from the title, it's a study strategy workshop, and really what it's trying to do is to give you the top tips from my experience. I've been preparing candidates for CFA for nearly 20 years now, but also the team which we have here at Fitch Learning. So we have a significant number of CFA instructors. I think in the London office alone we have well over 100 years worth of cumulative CFA exam training experience. So basically about a year ago we sat down as a team and just pulled our heads, our thoughts to come up with a list of things we wish we had known in advance before doing CFA. And from there it kind of created this document, this workshop of these top ideas, top tips for success. Okay, as you can imagine, there's a bit of overlap, but that doesn't really do any harm. Okay, so we got a couple of people who have come in already. So we got someone from Henley-on-Thames, a lovely part of the world. Know it very well. So anyway, hopefully there'll be a few other people. Ah, look, someone from Portugal. Excellent. All right. So there's expecting a mixed range of people, maybe from North America as well, and hopefully it'll be useful. And if you have any questions during this session, please type it. I have a little screen to the next to me which I can look at. Some questions I might answer as you've typed them. Others I may delay and sort of batch them together or wait until a different part of the presentation. But say the whole point of this session is to give you tips, study tips and pointers to be successful. We won't be able to cover technical content, so please don't start asking detailed questions about deferred tax. It's not that kind of workshop, but hopefully I can give you some useful real-world tips for passing CFA. Now, for those of you who may not be familiar with Fitch Learning, there's a couple of info slides just so you know a little bit about us. So, as I said, we've been training people for many years now, coming up to 19 years, and we train around about 3,000-ish people for CFA exam every year. So we have a lot of experience of preparing people for the exam. And we offer a whole range of different products, from classroom learning to review classes, which is just more like exam-focused Q&A. And we have a full, detailed online platform, which is known as Cognition. All right. So we'll have a little chat about Cognition in due course. But if you hear me mention it, that's the name we have for the online platform. Okay. In terms of the platform Cognition, there's a desktop version and also a mobile version which works for Android and Apple iOS. And the app allows you to be fully portable, so you can watch videos and do questions offline if you wish to. In fact, the other day it was quite humorous. I was underground. I was in the tube on the underground train. Obviously, there's no phone signal down there. There's no Wi-Fi down there. And I sat down, and next to me there was a chap on his iPad watching a video. And you can't stop yourself glancing over to see what they're watching. And would you believe it? He was watching a video of me. So a CFA video he was watching in the underground of me teaching level 2 pension accounting. So that proves you can watch it even deep underground on a train, so fully offline there. So we'll talk a bit more about the Cognition and the various options we have to help you as we go through this session. The session normally lasts about 50 minutes, give or take, but please ask some questions along the way. and I'll try and give you as much help and as much input from my experience as possible. Okay. At the very end of these slides, there's some details, contact details, where you can reach out to our regional offices if you want to find some more information. Okay. So let's have a quick look at these top tips. And I said at the start, there is an element of overlap. You'd imagine that to be the case. But I think as a body of knowledge, this is fantastically helpful. All right? And I think if you were to take on board these tips and really start to think about them, you can avoid a lot of the very common problems that we see year on year. Okay. So let's just have a quick look through and say, please ask any questions as we go through. Okay. Okay, number one, how many hours do you have to study? Well, this is really difficult to answer, and I'm asked this all the time, and the answer is always, it depends. It depends on your background. The CF Institute recommend around 300 hours of study per level. Now, do you need that number? Oh, who knows? Level 1 is a very, very broad qualification, I'm sure you know. You have to know a little bit about pretty much everything. So if you've got a broad undergraduate relevant degree, like a finance undergrad, you've probably done most of the work for level 1. So you probably won't need anything like 300 hours. But if you've got an English or history or even a science degree, then a lot of this is going to be new, so you'll probably need 300, maybe a bit more. Personally, when I started level 1 as a candidate many, many years ago, I came from an economics background. That used to be my job prior to teaching CFA. And so clearly for level 1, I was very much all over the econ sections and also the quants sections, and pretty competent with fixed income and rates. So probably about 30-ish, maybe 35% of the curriculum at the time, I would have rated myself as excellent at. Right? So looking back on that, I did not spend 300 hours for level 1. I probably did, well, I did under 200, difficult to know exactly how much, yeah, but maybe 150, 160, something like that. Okay, but that was my experience. For level 2, my degree of expertise and the overlap with the curriculum was a lot less. So in level 2, there were some quants, which again I was extremely happy with, and a little bit on derivatives, a little bit on swaps, but there was far less overlap. So maybe only 15% or so. Yeah, so I found I had to work a lot harder for level 2. And my weak area was accounts. And accounts is a big part of level 2. So I easily did 300 plus, maybe 350, maybe 400 hours for level 2. Right? Level 3, I did probably about 250. So I can honestly say over the 3 levels, I probably averaged around the 300-hour mark, you know, maybe a little bit under, but it's a pretty good estimate. So the important thing for you is I would assume at the start about 300 hours, and then kind of think about when are you going to start. Obviously the end date is fixed, you know, that's the exam date, but when you plan to start, and then you can start to do the simple maths here to work out, okay, how many weeks do you have of study, and therefore how many hours do you have to commit to for each week. For the average delegate, that takes it over around about a 6-month period. It works out at around about 11 to 12 hours a week. Right? All right. But obviously everyone has slightly different in terms of when they plan to start. Right? Once you've got this number in your head, let's say 11, 12 hours, you then got to start thinking when. When are you going to find this time? All right? It might be you just do a couple of decent days, maybe at the weekend. Yeah? That's what I did. It worked for me. Others prefer to do work before they go into work. Maybe they get to their work early and do an hour or so in the morning. Maybe people do in the evenings. You know, but start to have a think about when are you going to find this time. I imagine you, like certainly I was in my day, very busy. I mean, I didn't feel like I had 12 hours of doing nothing a week. My working week was quite long. Yeah, I just come back out of banking. Obviously, I was used to doing a long day. And the idea of finding time on top of what is maybe a 12 or 13 hour working day, on top of that, it was quite challenging. So, you know, the earlier you start, I guess, the better, because you can spread those hours over more weeks, okay? But the important thing is to really make that decision to commit to CFA. And once you've made that decision to commit, get started. Don't faff around and waste weeks, because you'll regret it at the end. So make a decision, get a plan, and don't waste any time. Now, for those that will help you, those who need help through our online portal, Cognition, we can help you here in two very important ways. Firstly, there's a question here from Juan about the Cognition study plan. We can help you by keeping on track. So you'll have a study plan which will use all of the experience, all the data that we've had over the years of those thousands and thousands of candidates. And so we know how long a typical candidate has taken to master a topic, let's say fixed income. So we'll know how many kind of hours that would be. And based on when you tell us you've started, and the portal you can change the start date of learning. You can't change the end date, that's the exam date. But based on your start date, it'll say, look, if you need to get this work done, then you're going to have to do it over this period of time. And it'll tell you a realistic kind of number of days or weeks to study, right? And it will help you monitor your progress. So there's a kind of built-in kind of intelligent diary planner, basically, that will map out your next 5 or 6 months. And it says, okay, these 3 weeks doing fixed income, then you're doing equity, etc., etc. And that should be realistic based on, say, the experience we have with all of our delegates. So the study planner built into Cognition is very important. The other part which will help you here is the fact that all of the learning videos are broken down into tiny, tiny bite sizes, what we call atoms. And the idea there is to enable you to do something useful, even if you've only got 5 or 10 minutes spare. So what I don't want you to do is to waste any time. You know, time is very precious, you don't get it back, so don't waste it. So if you've just got 10 minutes spare, you can actually do something really meaningful with 10 minutes. Most of our videos on Cognition are anywhere between 30 seconds long, maybe 2 minutes, something like that, you know. And then after each video, which is a very specific, very focused video, often addressing just one fact or one simple concept. After that video, you'll find there's a couple of questions, again, very focused to reinforce that point. And then you move on to the next video. So watch a video, couple of questions, done. You're looking at 3 or 4 minutes. Yeah? So we try and make it as easy for you to use your spare time. Okay, so have a plan, think about your hours, and work it out per week. Number one tip, okay? That moves on, I guess, to the second part about the study plan. All right, so you have your plan, you then obviously got to monitor it and make sure it adjusts. You know, you might suddenly have a busy time at work, you might get ill, you know, so you've got to be able to adjust the plan and tweak it. But, you know, creating that initial plan and then adjusting it is really important. Now again, the study plan built into Cognition will do that for you. So it'll set you deadlines, it'll monitor your progress or monitor your activity. So every video you watch, every question you do, it'll monitor. It also, by the way, monitors how long you take. So it'll work out how long you took to answer each question. And everything you do gets benchmarked against all of our historic data. So we have a lot of big data which we can use to benchmark your performance. And all that is then used to adjust your deadline. So you know, if it looks like you've fallen behind, we'll say, right, you still have to do the next topic, but you've got to now catch up. So the study plan will get you back on track, right? Hopefully, right? Gaps in your knowledge. Now, we all have gaps in our knowledge. No one knows everything. I've been, say, preparing candidates for level 1, in fact for all 3 levels, for a long time now. And I've probably taught the entire level 1 curriculum, I would say at least 15, maybe 20 times, okay? And I still don't know all of it, right? So no one can know all of it, right? And that's normal, okay? What you want to make sure, though, that you don't have big gaps in your knowledge, nor must you not question spot. Anyone who says, oh, this will come up in the exam and this won't come up, is not being honest. Right? You cannot really second guess the questions. Okay, and over the years, the examiner is pretty careful at making sure that they test the four corners of your curriculum. So it's important when you study, you keep that breadth. Right? The danger is, and this is human nature, I did it the same as well, is you generally spend too much time on the areas you like and which you're good at. And you get that kind of warm glow, don't you? When you've done 100 questions on pricing a bond, you've got 100 questions correct. You think, oh, aren't you brilliant? Haven't you done very well? Well, actually, no. What you've done is wasted your time. And if you could have done a sample of those 100 questions and got them right, and that would be enough to reassure you, fixed income, and you could use that other time more carefully on other topics. That's what this portal, Cognition, will do. This algorithm will give you a sample of questions. So most candidates will not answer all of our questions in the learning part of the question bank. So our portal is broken into two halves, a learning part and an exam focused called a review part. In the learning part, where obviously you're trying to learn content, there are, I forget, 3,500 or so questions. Most candidates will not go anywhere near that full number because there's an algorithm that samples those questions. And based on your performance, it'll work out whether you need any more. And once you've satisfied the algorithm that fixed income, maybe they'll give you 20 questions out of 100, let's say, then you can move on, and it will move you on. It'll stop you spending too long on your strong areas, and it will force you to look at some of your weaker areas. Okay, so it should hopefully, in doing so, save your time. Otherwise, you'll end up just doing the stuff you like and you're good at, which probably means you're going to be quite narrow in your focus. Okay, so try and avoid that narrowness. You've got to try and keep it quite broad. Okay. Ethics. Now watch out for ethics. Ethics is obviously a really important area. It's 15%, which is the second biggest weighting at level 1. It's actually around 15% for all 3 levels, and the bulk of ethics is the same for all 3 levels. So if you nail it for level 1 now, then it helps you for levels 2 and 3 in the future. So ethics is really, really important. Unfortunately, it's also really, really dull. I'll be honest with you. If I try to read more than about 10 pages, I will just fall asleep. It was impossible to keep my concentration. But that doesn't mean you ignore it. You still need to go through it. And again, the Cognition videos will help you. They break it down, a few questions. They keep you moving through it. Right? Now, 15%. You can't obviously lose 15%. So you have to make sure you do ethics. How you do ethics? Well, the Institute book, curriculum book, which obviously you get an e-book, a link for an e-book when you register for the exam. All right? The e-book doesn't come from Fitch Learning. All right? It's separate. It's basically once you registered for the actual CFA exam, they'll send you a link for the e-book and you can download it. Thoroughly recommend you use the e-book for ethics. It's in the e-book. They'll show you the various rules, the standards, and after each standard, there are some fantastically relevant paragraphs with like kind of fairly real-world scenarios about John, who's a trader, and he takes an order from a client and he does X, Y, and Z, blah blah. And the question is, has John violated this particular standard? And it gives you a really good discussion afterwards about whether he has or hasn't. Really recommend you look at those. Unfortunately, we're not able to reproduce those or even get close to reproducing them. CF Institute are quite, as you'd imagine, fairly tough on copyright infringement. So I'll leave that for you to have a look at. Now, we do have questions. Absolutely, we've got loads of questions, hundreds of questions on ethics. But probably the best resource is the CFA book for ethics, if I'm honest. Okay. So it's really important, 15%. Also, if you are borderline in terms of your mark, now no one knows, by the way, where the passing score is. It's a secret. Right? All we do know is that no one's ever failed who has scored 70% or above. That does not mean the passing score is 70%, but yeah. It's probably in the mid to high 60s, if I'm honest. But anyway, whatever that passing score is, if you're just south of it, close but south, they'll decide whether you get through purely based on your ethics score. So really, I mean, for those two reasons, this should be your #1 priority. It's a massive topic weighting, 15%, and if you're borderline, and many people I think will be borderline. The CFA exam is so broad, it's so difficult to learn all the information within a very busy job that many of you have. A lot of people find they'll be borderline. I don't think there's many people who walk out of that exam centre after the exam saying, that was easy. You know, I think it's difficult. There's not many people who walk out saying, that was impossible, because those people don't tend to turn up to do the exam because they haven't done any work. So the people who are there, yeah, but you'll find the standard deviation is pretty small and the range is going to be quite tight. So I think a big chunk of people will be close to that passing score. So if you are close to that passing score, so they will purely judge your pass or fail by your ethics score. Okay. That said, you don't actually have to pass ethics. There's a question here from James about that. So you could get 0 for ethics, but nail every other topic and you're through. All right. But that's quite risky. But if you turn out to be borderline, then they simply look at your ethics score. Okay. But you can absolutely pass all 3 levels without getting a single ethics question correct. Wouldn't recommend it, but you can do that. Okay, so given that I've bigged up ethics for you, how are you going to do this? Well, for me, given that I found this topic so inherently dull and I'd fall asleep if I try and spend too long doing it, I used to be in the little and often camp. So I'd make sure, basically what I did 20 odd years ago is really what cognition is now doing, but we didn't have cognition back then. So cognition breaks everything down into small bite-sized chunks, do a few questions, then move on. That's exactly what worked for me. So I would, read a standard or even a part of a standard, think of a few questions, and then come back to it another time. So that used to be my morning and evening time on the train. When I'm commuting to work, I used to have about 30 minutes both morning and evening, and those 30 minutes I would spend most of that time looking through a bit of ethics. And that was about my maximum for one, it was 30 minutes. After that it was like head drops. Right? So to me, little and often. But I must say, talking to my colleagues, I'm actually probably in the minority here. A lot of my colleagues who have done CFA, they prefer to cram at the end. They say this is so narrative, so dry, they use their short-term memory. So there's your choice. I guess you should know by now what works for you. But the important thing is you do not ignore ethics. Okay. Next one, exam practice. Goes without saying that it's one thing reading content, whether that's content from a slide, whether that's watching an online video in cognition, whether it's reading the CFA curriculum. That's fine, and obviously that's important, but you still have to then practice questions. So question banks are important. I said we have, I forget the exact number, but thousands and thousands of questions. I don't think you'll be lacking in questions on cognition. Okay, and it's important you do questions, but as I said earlier, it's important you don't waste your time doing unnecessary questions. Right? So I said before, there's no point doing 100 questions on one topic and getting 100 correct. You've probably wasted your time. You could have done better with an intelligent sample from those 100, get the sample right, move on. So remember, cognition will do that. It'll look at your performance, benchmark it, and it'll soon work out if you have mastered a certain topic. Okay. About the exam as well, it's worth noting or reminding you that the actual exam is quite a beast in terms of the physical demands and mental demands, but physical. People underestimate the physical aspect of the exam. So you're doing 2 3-hour papers, obviously on the same day. You have to arrive for each sitting in advance to go through security and registration, a bit like an airport, a bit like checking in at an airport, okay? So realistically, you're going to be arriving at the test centre probably around about 8 o'clock in the morning. It'll take you probably 15 or 20 minutes to get through security, and you want to be sat down at around about 8:30. If you leave it too late, they may just shut the door and lock you out and set the exam off and then let you in afterwards, but you've lost some time. So okay, you're probably at this test centre from about 8 o'clock in the morning. The exam goes from 9 through to 12. You can't leave early, so you have to sit there for 3 hours. And then it takes about 10 minutes or so for them to collect up the papers and dismiss you in an orderly manner. Your afternoon exam starts at 2, but you have to start registering and queuing for security again around about 1 o'clock. So you probably have about 15 minutes break. All right? And then you sit in the afternoon for another 3 hours and finish around about 5. So apart from that sort of 50-minute window at lunchtime, you're going to be from about 8 through to 5 stuck on your table. At that table, exam table, you're not allowed to eat or drink. That's the physical nature. Trying to maintain concentration with limited ability to hydrate yourself in particular. There will be water fountains, water available at test centres, but you cannot drink at your desk. So you'll have to sacrifice time in the exam to go and get yourself a drink. So most delegates don't sacrifice time, and therefore they end up being dehydrated. Now you can train for this. Athletes train for this. If any of you have been through Ramadan, you'll know that your body does adjust to not being able to eat or drink during the day. But the important thing is it takes a bit of time. So I would try it. When you're getting near to the business end, near to the actual exam, try and do a 3-hour paper without stopping for a cup of coffee, without having a drink. You'll have a headache at the end of it. But if you keep doing that, eventually your body actually starts to adjust. And you'll get used to maybe getting hydration in the evening, and you won't need to have so much hydration during the day. But I just mention it because people always come out of the exam saying the afternoon paper was much harder than the morning. It's not harder. It's just that their mental capacity is impaired because they are dehydrated. They haven't trained for the physical nature of it. So bear that in mind. Now, if you want some help, we do run a full, proper, proctored mock exam, the full experience, which you can do in advance of the big day, which obviously can help you get used to the demands. Okay, but watch out for the exam. It's a bit of an animal when it comes to the length of time you're in there with very little water. Okay, pace yourself. Again, very important tip here. This actually was one of my tips. You want to be ready for the exam on the exam date. It's no point peaking a month early or a month late. That's a disaster. But you want to peak your performance for the exam date. Okay. So what normally happens is you should start your preparation and increase your intensity. So maybe if you're starting in January for a June exam, maybe you'll start off doing 8 or 9 hours a week. And then as you move through into February, you add 1 or 2 hours per week. And then again in March, again in April. And so by the time you get to May, you're now really gathering pace. You're doing 15, maybe 20 hours a week, and that momentum starts to build up. And probably the most important part of this pacing, if you can, I would try and get a week off before the exam. A lot of people do that. In fact, it has been documented that trading volumes a week before the CFA exam are actually down in most markets, and I think it's because a lot of people take that week off. Personally, I don't think I would have passed any of the levels without having that week off. In that week, where you're doing question paper, question paper, question paper, you start to really make connections in your brain. You start to really hone your exam technique. You stop making stupid mistakes. and you can probably find that week alone will improve your score by 5 to 10%. So absolutely vital. If you can, obviously this comes back to the point, and then discuss it with your peer group. It's one of the tips coming up, but I'll mention it here. This is so important. The moment you commit to CFA, I probably would have a word with your line manager and say, look, this week in June, is there any chance I can have some time off? Some firms give you study leave, others say take us holiday, but get the request in early. It's really, I think, very, very important, that last week. That said, don't try and be too ambitious. Don't try and do all of your work in that last week. Don't overload it. Otherwise, you'll end up just being extremely tired, and you will underperform on the day. Okay. So think about the pace. If you find yourself getting tired and demotivated and just not really wanting to study, take a break. Have a weekend off. Do something that just gives you a bit more energy. Try and build in some physical exercise as well. I used to do some of my best studying while walking my dogs, and that outside fresh air, the exercise. It's amazing how your brain helps there. The exercise and the fresh air, and suddenly something clicks in your brain. Think, oh yeah, that's why. So be aware of it, but watch out for your pace. You want to start lowish, but really try and build up and accelerate. Okay. The calculator. All right. There are 2 calculators which you are allowed to use in this CFA exam, and only 2. We have the Hewlett-Packard 12C, which no one really uses because it's very expensive, and it uses reverse Polish logic, which if that doesn't mean anything to you, then avoid it. And the Texas Instruments BA2+, okay, which is much cheaper and much more like a normal regular calculator. So the Hewlett-Packard is odd. I mean, only use the Hewlett-Packard if you know it. So if you're a dinosaur like me, then back in the 90s, if you went to any trading floor of an investment bank, you would see lots of Hewlett-Packards. It was the go-to financial calculator in the 90s. It takes a while to get used to. Once you've cracked it, it's fantastic, but it's not easy to crack. For example, a very simple calculation like 3 times 4. On the Hewlett-Packard, you do 3 enter 4 times. So the command button you do at the end. So it's really not very intuitive. Whereas a Texas Instruments is much more like a regular calculator. Right? So you need to grab yourself a calculator. Get yourself an actual calculator. I stress that because you can get an app for a smartphone which actually looks like the calculator and has all the functionality of the calculator. But you're not allowed to bring phones into the exam. So I've known a few people who have used the app on their smartphone, and that's all they've used. Come the exam, get their smartphone out, a proctor comes over and says you're not allowed to bring that into the exam hall, and therefore rips up your exam paper because you have violated an exam rule. So please get your hands on a proper calculator and then use it all the time. Let that be your main, if you like, Excel in your pocket, because it can do a lot of things Excel can do. And there's some fantastic shortcuts in there. Now, on the Cognition portal, we do have a full calculator guide that takes you through every single function you need of this calculator. All right, here are some, not all of them, but NPV, IRR, very, very important. There's a fantastic amortization function, great for accounting for leases and for bonds. One of my favorites was iConvert, where you can, it's just this one down here above number 2. iConvert enables you to switch between a compound interest rate and a simple interest rate. There's depreciation, there's a data and stat function where you can work out standard deviation, for example. There's a break-even function on here. There's a profit function. There's a lot of functions on here. There's not everyone we use. There's a bond function, which is too complicated for us at CFA. But it's a really, really powerful tool. So get a calculator early on and get used to it, because when it comes to the exam, you do not want to be hanging around thinking, now what button do I press? It has to be second nature. All right? If you spend too long on calculation questions, you're going to run out of time. If you know your calculator, the calculation questions will be your favourite questions, because the calculator does all the hard work. All right? So please make sure you get your hands on a Texas Instruments calculator and practice with it. Even if you use Excel at work, just every now and then see if you can use the calculator instead. It just keeps you fresh and current there. Okay. Okay, I mentioned earlier about peer group pressure. Very important, particularly to talk to your line manager, so to try and free up some time, maybe a week before the exam. But also talk with your partner, your family. When I was studying for CFA, it meant that during the weekends I was studying, so therefore I was not able to do any of the jobs around the house. I didn't spend too much time with my children. I opted out of cooking and cleaning and shopping, and all that went on to my wife. And so I needed her support. Without her support, I would not have been able to pass. So you may have someone similar where you have to discuss with them and say, okay, well, if I study CFA, it's going to have an imposition on you, and you can work out the best strategy for that. It could be your colleagues at work. By you doing CFA, you might want to leave work early a couple of days. So maybe rather than leaving work at 7:30 or 8 in the evening, you might decide to leave work at 6. All right? But knowing you're going to then do 2 or 3 hours of study for CFA. But the fact you're leaving early, it may well have a knock-on effect with your colleagues. So again, have a chat. Don't keep it secret. Let them know you're doing CFA. If you can find someone who's studying in your bank with you, or wherever you work, or in your town, or whatever, hook up with them. A study group can be very, very useful. I did all 3 levels studying with a friend of mine, and I found it so helpful just to email her, call her up, and I'd say, listen, I'm struggling with this concept, what do you reckon? And just hearing her say, actually, I find that difficult as well, was a huge relief. Because when you're on your own, if you don't understand something, you immediately assume that you're being stupid. But if you're doing it with someone else and you get some confirmation that actually this is a tricky area, suddenly the pressure's off. Now, if you don't have a study buddy, a peer group, then we can help you here at Fitch Learning. You can use us as your bounce ideas off kind of person. We have a global instructor team, and you can use the Cognition platform to send in some queries, and we can say, yeah, this is hard, this is easy, this is the answer, and why, etc., etc. Right? So talk to your peer group, talk to your support network and your peer group, and just make sure they are aware of what you're doing. There's nothing worse than you leaving the office early and having those snide remarks and comments about you being a part-timer. Whereas if the people around you know that you're leaving work to go and do studying, and they know you're doing CFA, trust me, they'll know that CFA is a rigorous exam. It just takes out all that kind of nastiness that may happen. So talk to your peer group, talk to your line manager, and get a plan of action. Okay. Cramming, I think I mentioned this earlier, that the CFA exam is very, very broad, much broader than I think a typical undergraduate exam. I think back to my university days, and for all of my levels, even my finals, I didn't actually study that long. I mean, I generally started around about sort of, February, March. I did probably 2 or 3 months of studying, hit the exams, passed. I don't think you can really do that for any level actually, because it's so broad. You have to learn a lot more content. Remember, it's not modular. You've got to keep all that information in your head and pass an exam in one go. So cramming doesn't really work. I mean, for level 1, there's around about 60 readings. A reading is like a chapter, which could be anywhere from sort of 20 to 80 pages. It takes time to go through those and to understand the content. Now again, our Cognition platform will provide videos that hopefully will take you through the content in a more efficient way than reading the curriculum book, with the exception of ethics that we said earlier. But it still takes you time. And if you try and leave it all to the very last few weeks, I think you're going to fail. Right? So try not to cram. It really goes back to the first point we said earlier about have a plan, think about those 300 hours and think about how many hours you're going to be doing each week, okay? So don't cram, spread it over. So the atomization of the videos will help, and obviously all the questions will help. As you go through CFA, you'll find there's more focus on proper understanding. Quite a lot of level 1 is just knowing, facts and definitions. And there's a few questions which require you to understand it, but often you don't have to. Levels 2 and 3, the level of depth required really increases. Right? And so that's where you really have to understand, and you can't rote learn. You can't pass by memorization, basically. Level 1, you probably could, if I'm honest, but even so, if you're trying to memorize content, that's going to take time. So cramming, I don't think is going to work. So have a plan, said 5 or 6 months, normally is what people do, okay? Pressure of the exam day. We mentioned the exam day earlier. I've said it's a physically demanding day. I mean, it's tiring doing 2-3 hour exams with limited ability to take on water, okay? So, just bear in mind that aspect of the exam day. Accept the fact that you're going to be a bit nervous, a little bit worried, and there'll be questions in that exam that you can't do. There's questions, in fact, all the questions you haven't seen before. Right? You do not get any past papers for levels 1 and 2. All right? There's no such thing as a past paper. So every question on your exam day will be a new question. Okay? And you're going to find, even no matter how much you prepare, there's some you don't know. Just accept it, move on. Personally, I used to always start with my strong areas, because if I'm going to get a question wrong, it's by definition going to be in my weak areas. And as you go through your 3 hour paper, your performance starts to get reduced anyway because you start getting tired. So if I've got reduced performance, all I don't want to do is to have that reduced performance period coincide with an area which I know quite well, because I might still make a silly mistake because I'm losing concentration. Whereas if I can move my hardest topics towards the end of the paper, given that there's a good chance I'm going to get some of those questions wrong anyway, then I'm not so worried if I'm doing my hard topics at the time of the exam when I'm getting tired. What I don't want to do is throw away a mark that I really should get because I happen to be getting tired. So I would start with my strong topics. So for me, I used to do quants, economics, ethics. I'll do those 3 topics first. I would move financial reporting to the end. That was always my weakest area. So remember, the exam does bunch up your questions into topics, so they don't mix them all up. You'll find all of your ethics questions will be in one section, and then all of your quants. So you can jump around and go to your favorite topic, okay? So just bear that in mind. Also, a few practical aspects. Print off your exam ticket from the CFA Institute and stick that in your passport. And while you're at it, check your passport to make sure, excuse me, it's still valid for the exam date. Now, the other thing to watch out for is many of our international delegates, they have different names. They have an adopted English name and their official name in their passport. It's really important when you register for the CFA exam, you use your official name. It can be quite tricky, I know, particularly if you are, say, working in London and you are every day using your adopted English name, and you may automatically just use that name. But if that name differs from your passport, they will not let you in. So please just, when you do register for the exam, if you've already registered and you think you made a mistake, not a problem. You've still got plenty of time to change the exam details. So check your passport and make sure the name exactly matches. It doesn't matter so much if your registered name doesn't include all of your middle names, but your first name and your family name, your surname have to match, okay? And also, when you get nearer the time, make sure you know the exam rules. I mentioned earlier mobile phones. Happens every year. People get caught with a mobile phone, a cell phone in their pocket. They normally reply, but it's turned off. And the proctor says, I don't care, it's a violation. And your exam result will be torn up. So this is one of many rules. So please make sure you follow the rules. So no mobile phones, no weapons or explosives either, but that's probably more obvious, and I don't think many people will break that rule inadvertently. But please make sure you know those rules. Okay, hopefully those tips have been useful. I guess probably the most important one is to have a plan. Think about your hours per week. Think about when you're going to study and discuss it with people around you. Discuss it with your family, friends, whoever you live with. Discuss it with your line manager. Discuss it with your colleagues. Get everyone to know, and that way it's much, much easier to do your planning. All right? Where do we help here? Well, obviously Cognition can give you full comprehensive coverage of all of the content, broken down essentially as bite size. And then it's an incredibly intelligent algorithm that will give you questions, and it will give you enough questions for you to understand and pass a topic. It will not give you unnecessary questions. So it should be very efficient, because I know that you are very, very busy people. Right? We also offer at various locations around the world classroom teaching. That could be during the day, it could be evening classes, it could be at weekends. Okay. The classes can either come in two forms, basically. One type of classes is aimed at helping you learn and understand content, and the other one is purely an exam focused. We call them review classes, which really does question and answer. It's kind of assuming you know most of the content, but you want to just kind of fine tune it to the exam level. A lot of people who do online studies come just at the end to do like a 2-day review class. Others will go for an entire learning program. Others will just go as an online cognition. Right? So it really depends on what works for you as to which option will work for you. Right? If you have the online platform, you will have access to in virtual sense, join a class, because we will live web stream one of our classes. And you can kind of dial in, and if the time zone is compatible, you can watch real time a live class and ask questions like some of you have been doing this session. If the time zone doesn't match with you, then we will put a recording of the live class on the platform, and you can still watch it and still get in the habit, the discipline of maybe doing 2 evenings a week, which is what the classes are doing. And that helps you kind of keep that pace going through your studies. Okay, but so there's a bit of regional variation, and if you want some more detail, please contact our regional offices, and they'll advise you on the timing, the date, etc., and any other questions you happen to have regarding CFA. Right? So hopefully this has been useful. I don't know if there's any other last minute questions that people want me to address. I did say it's going to be about 50 minutes, and it's coming up to exactly 50 minutes, so I always like it when that happens. But if you have any queries which I haven't answered, either reach out to the people you see here, or you can, you might be able to find the information generally on the various social media streams. If you want to contact me directly, my name is Simon Holohan. And you can either just contact these people here and ask to speak to me, and they can put you in contact with me. Anyway, hopefully I'll wish you good luck in your preparation. I hope you do CFA. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you commit to it. And if you commit to it, I'm absolutely certain we can help you get through the exam. Thank you very much.